I'm really happy to be able to introduce Pierre Fayet, who has been awarded, I guess it's the fourth annual Arden Prize, and from the Fine Theoretical Physics Institute. Pierre got his degree from the University d'Orsay in France. He spent time then at Paul Romal, Superior, the Côte Polytechnique, and then at Caltech, CERN, so going back to the Romal Superior from in 98, where he's been since then. He's been awarded the bronze medal of the CNRS, the Prix Paul Langevin in 1982 to honor French physicists for exceptional work in theoretical physics. He's a member of the French Academy of Science since I think 1997, and he's the this one sounds my English or no paper. The commander of the Order of the Hector Palms award that I think goes back to the time of Napoleon. Uh, he's one of the founders of the theory of supersymmetry, and his so going back to the early 1970s, he's foundations of supersymmetry and supersymmetry breaking. His work with John Eliopoulos is one of the earliest examples of how to break a supersymmetry. He's really one of the first to actually pave the theory of supersymmetry and move it over to the side of phenomenology, and is largely responsible for what we call the as design today, Harold Dunn, this and these, to make it a phenomenological theory and introduce something that's optical arbitrarity, that he did with Clemens Farrar in 1978. And so that actually, the importance of that is can't be understated, because once you introduce that kind of symmetry, that's what led the conclusion that you could have a stable dark matter candidate in supersymmetric theories. And for some 40 years or so, that's where dark matter studies have been concentrated on. So today he's going to talk to us about supersymmetry, extra dimensions, the Higgs boson, and dark matter, and all of that. But now, before you start them, I have to give you the certificate. They can make pictures. So yeah, so you can get this back from computer on the and and the prize. Oh, it's heavy. God, it's very impressive. With that, okay.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for the award. Thank you for everything, inviting me here to give this colloquium. I'm very happy to be here again. I was there a little bit more than 20 years ago for the 30 years of supersymmetry, and also another time for a dark matter conference. And I'm
Dark side of the universe.
happy to be back again, and I have several friends here in the audience. And I'm happy and enjoy being here.
Thanks.
Oh,
Welcome, buddy.
okay. So I'm going to talk about a lot of things, mostly supersymmetry, but also a number of related subjects which deal with extra dimensions of space-time, very small, even smaller than that, which could exist. We don't know whether they exist or not. Most of the things I'm going to talk about are hypothetical. We don't know, but we are looking for that, and many people are doing experiments to look for possible signs of those interesting things that I'm going to talk about. So I got a prize in memory of Anatoly Larkin, and Anatoly didn't have a chance to meet him, but I learned that he was a professor here in this university, and that he was mostly a condensed matter physicist, and that he did a great thing in condensed matter. I'm not going to talk about that because I'm not able to do. I'm not a specialist in condensed matter, but you can see in the transparency that he did many interesting things, and that apparently he was a great scientist and a great person too. So I will talk now about kind of things I was alluded for before. So the basic question is, where do we live? In which world do we live? We live here in space, now in time, but maybe there is more than that. Maybe space has more dimension, very small, as I said before. And we shall see also with supersymmetry that maybe space has additional dimensions which are not very small for these new ones, but they are even stranger because they are what we call anti-commuting. And what is an anti-commuting number? If you have two anti-commuting numbers, if you make the product, you change the order, you get a minus sign. That's an anti-commuting coordinate. And as a result, the square of an anti-commuting coordinate, because it anti-commutes with itself, the square is 0. So it is a strange object, and it is the kind of object that we are going to discuss later. So a consequence of it is that we shall introduce many new particles, which are called the superpartners of the ordinary one. And I will tell you why we have to introduce these superpartners if we want to play with this new algebra of supersymmetry. And this will have also to do with the Higgs boson, which is associated with the spontaneous breaking of the electroweak symmetry, which was found at CERN a little bit more than 10 years ago. And people say actually Higgs boson, but it should be called Brout-Englert Higgs boson, in fact, but it is rather long. So sometimes I will say Brout-Englert or BEH boson, or I will just say Higgs boson, like everybody is doing now. But I wanted to recall that Brout and Englert are in fact the first, together with Higgs, to introduce this subject. This will have something to do with dark matter, as Keith was saying before, and also of other interesting objects. And we shall introduce, in fact, many questions, and we don't have so many answers. In fact, basically, you have almost no answers to this interesting question. But this is life, and this is why we are doing research. So I'm going to talk about unified theory, supersymmetry, and so on, many things. And then I realized that the starting point is the standard model of particle physics. So I have the usual transparency about the standard model. And we are going to discuss everything on a model. And this model is basically electrodynamics, quantum electrodynamics. So yesterday, I felt more or less obliged to try to introduce a little bit. Of course, I assume that you know electrodynamics, you know what is a photon. So I made an attempt to talk a little bit about photon, the property of the photon, the fact that the photon is a boson. And this will be useful later, because with supersymmetry, we shall relate boson, or attempt to relate boson with fermions. So I have to give example of what is a boson, and the photon is an example of the boson. And also I started to write a transparency explaining that the proton and neutron are not elementary objects. They are composite objects. They are made of free quarks. And I was starting to write that quarks have charge 2/3 and minus 1/3. And at that point, I say, okay, but in what unit? So I felt obliged to write a bit more, just to explain that the unit is the charge of the electron, the absolute value of the charge of the electron, in fact. And that's why we say that the electron has a charge -1, the positron has a charge +1. And the unit, in fact, the elementary charge, E, which is called to 1.6 10 to the -19 Coulomb. But what is a Coulomb? And the definition of the Coulomb has recently changed, because actually the Coulomb is now defined by deciding that the charge of the electron is going to be this number here, but it is exactly this number by definition of the Coulomb. So this has changed, and there is a price to pay for that, is that something else which previously was a constant is now going to be measured, which means that the magnetic permeability of the vacuum is no longer going to be 4 pi 10 to the minus 7, but it's going to be very close to this number, but it is now a quantity which has to be measured instead of being defined. When for the electron, it's the status has changed. The charge of the electron is now defined by a decision, and while before it has to be measured. But this is not my main subject, of course. The idea was to talk about a photon, and before talking about a photon, we have to talk a little bit about space, time, and relativity. And in space, we have 3 coordinates, and we usually consider the time as a 4th coordinate, and therefore, we describe events in space-time using 4 vectors. This is a 4-vector position, and when you go to electromagnetism, you take the electrostatic potential, the vector potential, and it all goes together into 4-vector potential, coordinate potential here. And the 3 components of the electric field and magnetic field go together, and they form the 6th component of the electromagnetic field tensor F nu. And it is written in the matrix, which means that you can act on this matrix by transformation, and these transformations are the transformation of the Lorentz symmetry group, which is a symmetry group of relativity. So in some sense, this symmetry group, which has generators of symmetry, which satisfy commutation relation, which are not written here, but you know them probably, they transform time into space, and they transform electricity into magnetism. And special relativity is you have a symmetry group, which is the Lorentz group, and beyond that, the Poincare group, says that physics is invariant under such transformation. And since electromagnetism is going to be our model, in fact, the Maxwell equation provide a framework and provide a unified description for electromagnetic phenomena within space-time. Then we talk about electromagnetic waves, which propagate in space and time. We talk about plane waves. This is just how we write plane waves in the framework of relativity. And then we go to the quantum theory. And in the quantum theory, when we ask the question, what is light made of? Light is made of photons. And photons have some characteristics. They carry each photon carries some amount of energy, which is fixed by the frequency of the angular frequency of the corresponding electromagnetic wave, carry some momentum which is fixed by the wave vector, and also carry plus or minus units of angular momentum. So these are the basic properties of the photons. And in fact, photons are what we call bosons, because at the next step, we have to discuss the properties of particles under exchange of 2 particles. And photons, they are bosons, which means that several of them can be in same quantum states. And on the other hand, this is not possible for fermions. If you have a defined quantum state, you can put 0 fermion or 1 fermion, but not 2. There is an exclusion principle which prevents 2 fermions to be in the same state. And finally, all particles, they are grouped into 2 categories. Particles of integer spin are boson, the best example being the photon, and particles of half integer spin, like electron, proton, neutron, quarks, and so on, they are fermions. And when we go to fields, bosonic fields satisfy commutation relation, And fermionic field satisfy anti-commutation relation. And later we shall go to supersymmetry, and supersymmetry transformation will turn bosonic field into fermionic field. Bosonic field commute, more or less, fermionic field anti-commute, and therefore the generator of a supersymmetry transformation turning a boson into a fermion, we shall get an algebra, and this algebra will involve anti-commutation relation for the generator of supersymmetry transformation. So this is for quantum electrodynamics. This is what I said. The constituents of matter, electron, proton and neutron are made of quarks. The proton is UUD, the neutron is DDU, and the quarks also have some special characteristics, which is called color. There are three possible colors, and when you have three quarks, you have one of each color of quarks, and you have a symmetry group. The symmetry group is a color symmetry group, and mathematically is the group SU3 of symmetric unitary matrix of unit determinant. So this is for matter, and now for interaction. Interaction are understood as due to the exchange of mediator particle. For electromagnetic interaction, the mediator is a photon. And for weak interaction, the mediators have the W and Z. The Z is coupled to a neutral current. The W is coupled to the charge current. And what changed with respect to electromagnetism is that the photon is massless, and correspondingly, the range of the electromagnetic interaction is infinite, while the weak interaction mediated by W and Z exchange is very small, of the order of 10 to the minus 16 centimeter, which correspond to the fact that the W and Z are very heavy, about 80 or 90 times the mass of the proton. And gluons here are responsible for strong interactions that will be exchanged between quarks, change the color of a quark, and there are 8 gluons because the SU3 group has 8 generators. What about interaction? So interaction, I talked already a little bit about electromagnetic interaction, weak interaction mediated by W and Z, strong interaction mediated by gluon, but in fact there is a fourth interaction, which is the one which is very easy to understand. Objects are falling, so it's a fourth sort of interaction, gravitational interaction. So we have 4 sorts of interaction, and they have, in fact, sometimes common elements, but they have also different properties. For example, gravity and electromagnetic interactions, they are long range. For example, they conserve parity, but weak interaction do not conserve parity, which means that the left and right-handed orientation in space have different properties for weak interaction. And this is a fact, and we would like to understand better why things are like that. We have 4 kinds of interaction, but why 4? Maybe there are others, and it will be presumptuous to claim that there are only 4 sorts of interactions. There could be others. And if there are others, what can we expect? What are the possibilities for thinking about new interaction, and how will we know about them? And this is, of course, something that we want to discuss. As usual, the starting point is the familiar transparency of the standard model with the menu. The menu is the spin-1 particle mediating interactions here. The fermion constituting matter, we have 3 families of leptons and quarks. If we have neutrino, three types of neutrino, we have the electron, the muon, and the tau particle, and 6 sorts of quarks, U and D for the proton and the neutron, the strange quark, the charmed quark, bottom quark, and top quark. So this is a great theory, and this is a great theory which has been very successful. And throughout the years, I mean, all the ingredients of the standard model have been successively discovered. First, the neutral current, then the charmed particle, which were built with the charmed quark, which was the fourth quark, the gluons mediator of strong interaction, W and Z boson, top quarks, and the last element was the Higgs boson, discovered at CERN 14 years ago, which was the last missing piece of the standard model. The standard model is now complete. We are very happy, okay? But after thinking about it, we have very many questions which remain. And there is also a usual list of questions which are not answered by the standard model. The standard model describes in a satisfactory way a large number of phenomena, but we don't know why things are so, and we would like to understand. We would like to understand why we have three families of quarks and leptons. What are the masses, the mixing angle, why the neutrino mix, why the neutrino oscillate, what about parity, what about the CP symmetry, what about the CP symmetry, CP problem, why CP is violated in weak interaction, but it is apparently conserved by strong interaction. What is dark matter made of? What about the Higgs boson? We found one. So it's great because originally many people were not thinking about that scalar particle, or at least elementary scalar particle could exist. And apparently we found one, but maybe there are others. And this raises a number of questions. The question is, what about the Higgs potential, which is responsible for the spontaneous breaking of the supersymmetry? It is described by two parameters, a mass parameter here responsible for the mass of the Higgs boson, and also coupling constant, a quartic coupling constant for the Higgs interaction of the Higgs boson. And here there is a side remark, and the side remark has something to do with supersymmetry. Suppose that for some reason the quartic coupling of the Higgs field here has this particular value, then the mass of the Higgs boson, according to the formula, which are the classic formula of the standard model, will just coincide with the mass of the Z boson. And this is something that we shall see again very soon within the framework of supersymmetry. And in this framework, in fact, we shall see that the Higgs boson self-interaction, in fact, will turn out to be promoted as a new part of electroweak gauge interactions, which is also one of the nice features of supersymmetry, which is not so well known. There are also a number of questions related with gravity. The role of gravity, how is it connected with particle physics? We would like to have a quantum theory of gravity, but this is difficult. Many people have been working on that, string and superstring people, and so on. What about the cosmological constant, which correspond to an intrinsic curvature of space-time? Why is it there? Why is it small? Does it evolve with time? There are a number of questions. Of course, I don't have time to discuss that. And what I would like to do is discuss what we can do if we want to implement additional symmetries. If you want to implement additional symmetries, there are basically two main things that you can do. One is try to relate quarks with leptons, and this is the approach of grand unification. And the other is try to relate boson with fermions, and this is the approach of supersymmetry. So one transparency about grand unification. Grand unification, we try to relate leptons here with quarks by putting together in larger multiplet of a grand unified gauge group. And the most commonly discussed grand unified gauge group is SU5, because it is the smallest group, which includes SU3 cross SU2 cross U1, which is the symmetry group of the standard model, as a cell group. So it's very nice at the beginning, because you take all the 15 quark and lepton field, you have 15 chiral field for each family, and you put them in a 5-bar representation, and in a tail representation, just them without any new particle. And you do a similar field for the gauge boson responsible for the interaction, the gluon W and Z and photons. So you have 12 gauge boson, and you shall put them in the adjoint representation of SE5, which is a representation of dimension 24, which means that we shall have two new gauge bosons, which are called X and Y, and which have the property of possibly inducing transition between quarks and between leptons and quarks or antiquarks, or between quarks and antiquarks. So as a side remark, when we talk about supersymmetry, many people say, haha, in supersymmetry, you double the number of particles, but we are only see half of the number of particles. So in grand unification, it's a little bit the same. You don't double the number of particles, but you double the number of forces. Because instead of having only 12 forces, as is the standard model, you now have 24 forces. You introduce new forces, and those new forces are supposed to be responsible for new phenomena, like proton decay. And of course, if proton decays, it's better for us that the lifetime of the proton be very long. And from the fact that the live experiments have been made, we get limits on the mass of the new boson possibly responsible for proton decays, and it has to be very heavy. One very nice thing about grand unification, which is usually advertised, is that the gauge coupling of strong electromagnetic and weak interaction nicely come together at high energy. So this is the aim of grand unification. At least if you take into account in the evolution of the coupling constant, supersymmetry, otherwise it doesn't work. So this is very nice. It's a good argument often presented in favor both of grand unification and supersymmetry. However, things are more complicated because when you introduce more symmetry, because the symmetry is not there, you have to break the symmetry. And in grand unification, you have a bigger group, so you have to break spontaneously the bigger group of symmetry. You do it with the adjoint 24. You introduce also a quintuplet of X's. Then you have many interaction between those Higgs representation, many new coupling constants, new problem about the origin of the mass scale, triplet doublet splitting problem. I will talk about that later if I have time. Some relation which don't seem to be satisfied between quarks and lepton masses. So this is for grand unification, but this is not the main subject of my talk. The main subject of my talk will be about supersymmetry. The question being, can one relate particles of different spin? And now I'll start talking about supersymmetry. So supersymmetry is a new algebra which was introduced a long time ago by different groups of authors. First in the Soviet Union by Goldfand and Lichtman and Volkov and Akudov, and very soon after at CERN by Wess and Zumino in 73. And then many people have started working on the subject and trying to take it and do physics with it. And in fact, there has been here a conference organized by Keith and collaborators in Minneapolis, probably more than 20 years ago, and with a book, Transparency and so on. And so supersymmetry is supposed to relate boson and fermion. Okay, but which ones? And if you look at the boson and the fermion that we know about, it's kind of difficult to imagine that they could be related. So I will explain why later. And at first, what is supersymmetry? So the starting point, it is an algebra. You don't do physics, yes. You have an algebra, you have a structure. The structure, you have a generator of symmetry, which is called Q. It is a Majorana spinor. Majorana spinor, to say things in a simple way, it's a real part of a real spinor, of a Dirac spinor, more or less. And it satisfies anti-commutation relation. And the characteristic feature of the anti-commutation relation is that on the right-hand side, you have the generator of translation. And this is at the origin of a relation between supersymmetry and space-time. Because translation, if you start thinking that you generate a translation in space-time, and if you make it local, you can only do it if you consider deformation of space-time. So you can do it only in the framework of general relativity. And this is why gravity will come naturally in the game within the framework of supersymmetry and within the framework of local supersymmetry. And P mu, so generates space-time translation, but also space-time will be extended to new coordinates, which I was saying a word about before. They will be anti-commuting coordinate. And the fact that they are anti-commuting is related to the fact that the generator of supersymmetry does not satisfy commutation relation as in an ordinary algebra, but it satisfies anti-commutation relation. So we have new coordinates, and those new coordinates are called theta, anti-commuting thing, and those theta 1 to theta 4 are the four real components of a Majorana spinor, and they anti-commute. And instead of having only fields, fields are function of space and time. In supersymmetry, you introduce superfields, which are function of space, time, and on the new anti-commuting coordinate. And because the new coordinate is anti-commuting, the square is 0, and superfield will correspond to a finite number of ordinary fields, both boson field and fermion field. And a single superfield will be able to describe at the same time bosons and fermions. So there are nice features of supersymmetry. One of them is that it provides a natural way to introduce fundamental spin zero particle in the game, because usually, I mean, for a long time, physicists didn't like fundamental spin zero particles because they say, oh, they have a mass square parameter. And if they have a mass square parameter, then we get divergences and the mass is going to be very high and so on. And we don't understand how a spin zero particle can have a mass which is relatively small. But within supersymmetry, this can be controlled because the fundamental spin zero field is related by supersymmetry to a spin 1/2 field, and the mass of a spin 1/2 field may be controlled with the help of a chiral symmetry. But the question now is what to do with this. It's a great algebra, but we want to use it to do physics. So initially, people said and even advertised supersymmetry by saying that supersymmetry relates bosons and fermions, and bosons are the carriers of forces of interactions, and the fermions are the constituents of matter. So supersymmetry is going to unify forces with matter. This is sometimes said, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and if we want to use supersymmetry, we have to face a number of questions, because apparently nature cannot be supersymmetric. I mean, if it were supersymmetric, boson and fermion would have the same masses, and this is not the case. Then people say, okay, but let's break it supersymmetry, because for weak interaction, we know that electroweak interaction is broken. We can try to do the same with supersymmetry. But with supersymmetry, it's not so easy to do that. In fact, at the beginning, it seemed to be impossible, because in the standard model, if you want to break an ordinary gauge symmetry, you say that the symmetric state is here in the middle, and it has more energy than the non-symmetric state. You go to the non-symmetric state, and the symmetry is going to be spontaneously broken. But within supersymmetry, for reasons which I don't have time to explain, it's the other way around. If you have a potential which is like that, the space, the state which is at the bottom is going to be supersymmetric, and the state which is here in the middle with more energy is going to be non-supersymmetric. So in fact, in a supersymmetric theory, whenever you have a supersymmetric state, you are sure it's going to be stable. So at the beginning, this seemed to make the spontaneous breaking of supersymmetry impossible. Fortunately, we found several mechanisms to do that. I'm not going to talk about it because there is no time. But one argument initially against supersymmetry was that if you break spontaneously global supersymmetry, you get a massless Goldstone fermion. And this massless Goldstone fermion cannot be identified with a neutrino. And where is it? So people were saying, but we have not seen a Goldstone fermion, and some of my papers were refused with the argument that there should be a Goldstone fermion, and nobody has seen a Goldstone fermion, so the paper shouldn't be published. So that's what I experiment. Also, other questions that in supersymmetric theory, we have plenty of Majorana fermions, but in nature, we know only Dirac fermions. There are no Majorana fermions. Maybe neutrino, but it's another question. And so how do you do? How can you use those Majorana fermions to make a realistic theory? How to define conserved quantum number like B and L? Because B and L, the baryon number and lepton number, in the past, they were even called fermionic numbers to imply that, well, these fermionic numbers are carried by fermion, not by boson. And in fact, we shall see soon that within supersymmetry, these fermionic numbers, namely baryon number and lepton number, will be also attributed to boson. And of course, now it's completely trivial, this remark, because I'm going to tell you that we shall have spin zero quark, spin zero lepton. And once you talk about spin zero quarks and spin zero lepton, it gets obvious that they should carry baryon number and lepton number. But a long time ago, it was by far not obvious, and people were saying that, oh, why do you do that? It doesn't make sense. Again, we go back to this question. We take the boson, you take the fermion, we try to relate them together, and it doesn't work. We tried everything, it doesn't work. But something of it remained. For example, I tried to relate the photon with the neutrino, but it doesn't work. But the photon then is going to be related with some sort of a new neutrino. And this some sort of a new neutrino, I call it the neutrino of the photon, and the neutrino of the photon became the photino. And same thing for the gluon. The gluon cannot be related with quarks for plenty of reasons, but the gluons are going to be related with new fermions, which would be octets, which will be some sort of neutrinos associated with the gluons, and those became the neutrinos. So altogether, what we have to do if we want to think that maybe nature is supersymmetric is we have to double the spectrum to associate every no particle to its supersymmetric counterpart, which we call superparticle. And then people starting to laugh because the supersymmetry was supposed to relate boson to fermion. And then you come and you explain that, well, it will relate to boson to fermion, but it will relate non-boson with new fermion and not fermion with new boson. So people were saying, well, this proves that supersymmetry doesn't make sense, it is useless, and so on. And but because supersymmetry has very nice properties, which I will describe soon, then many people, after a few years, started to be convinced that after all, maybe it was a good idea, and maybe things really could be like that. Of course, to know whether things are like that or not, we need at some point to find experimentally a supersymmetric particle somewhere, and unfortunately, this has not been the case up to now. So spin zero boson, I say that supersymmetry is a natural place to have fundamental spin zero boson. We shall have two kinds of spin zero boson, Higgs boson, ordinary Higgs boson, and others, and also scalar spin zero lepton, spin zero quarks, and all those new particles will be distinguished by a new feature which is called R parity. And R parité, in fact, has something to do with the reflection symmetry of the anti-commuting parameter theta in superspace. So in some sense, it is light parité. It is a geometric symmetry within superspace. And this, okay, since I have the transparency, now I'll talk a little bit more about the Higgs interaction. So for those of you who have worked on the supersymmetric extension of the standard model, this is the quartic Higgs potential which you have, which involved two Higgs doublets, because in the standard model, you have only one Higgs doublet. But in the supersymmetric extension of the standard model, you need to double the thing. So you need to have not one, but two Higgs doublets. And as a result, in the spectrum, instead of having one Higgs particle, you shall have altogether at least five Higgs particles, because you get four more. So you get a charged Higgs boson, which you more or less expect to find sometime, and additional Higgs boson. And here, what you see is that the quartic coupling of the Higgs boson is just fixed at the value I was alluded to before. And if you look at this value, it gives you the mass of the Z is the same as the mass of the Higgs boson. And there is a reason for that, is that supersymmetry naturally associate massive gauge boson with corresponding gauge boson which have the same mass as long as supersymmetry is concerned. Also, just a very short word about the new parameters. This is a technical point for those of you who maybe have been working on supersymmetry. They know the mu parameter. They heard about a so-called mu problem. I don't tell you what it is. But the mu parameter within this framework was, from the beginning, made dynamical, just in a standard model. In fact, in quantum electrodynamics, the mass of the electron is a parameter. When you go in the standard model, the mass of the electron is replaced by a field, and this field is a product of a Yukawa coupling constant times a Higgs field. And here, the same thing within supersymmetry, the mu parameter becomes dynamical. It depends on space and time. And this takes you from the MSSM, which is a minimal supersymmetric extension of the standard model, to one of the variants, which is called NMSSM. I'm not going to talk about that because it's technical. So now that the menu is that here you have in blue all the particles of the standard model, quark, lepton, Higgs boson, and so on. You have the superpartners in red, and you see that you have more Higgs boson. And the table has been written in such a way that it makes apparent the connection between gauge and Higgs boson, which are a consequence of supersymmetry. Because, for example, if you take a Z boson, a massless Z boson has 2 degrees of freedom. But as a result of the Higgs mechanism, when the Z acquires the mass, it has more degrees of freedom. It has now 3 degrees of freedom than this mass. And it is the same thing for the Z multiplet in supersymmetry. A massless Z multiplet in supersymmetry has 4 degrees of freedom, 2 for the Z, 2 for the supersymmetric partner. But when the Z acquires the mass, you get more degrees of freedom. And in the Z multiplet, you get 8 degrees of freedom. So you get 3 for the Z, you get 4 for the 2 zeros associated with the Z, and you get here an additional 3 degrees of freedom, which describe the Higgs boson. So you expect to have charged Higgs boson associated in some sense with the W. This is normal because you have 2 Higgs doublets instead of a single one. You have more neutral Higgs boson, and one of them is associated with the Z boson under 2 supersymmetry transformations. Of course, this is a situation when supersymmetry is not broken, but electroweak symmetry broken, which you can do, and then you are also to break supersymmetry. This will introduce mixing between all those new particles. So R parité, I said a word about that. R parité Originally, it's something very simple. In fact, it's a remnant of a Yuan symmetry. It's a discrete remnant of a Yuan symmetry. But at the end of the day, it amounts to something which is very simple, which is +1 for all particles of a standard model and -1 for all their superpartners. So it is a supersymmetry which up to now is remarkably well conserved because it is one for everybody. But once you introduce superpartner, it is not yet clear whether R parity is always going to be conserved or not. If it is stable, then the lightest supersymmetric particle, if the symmetry is conserved, is going to be stable, and it is a great candidate for being a dark matter particle. And otherwise, it will decay, and if it decays, there has been some work done on theories in which R parity is concerned. Besides being a geometric symmetry associated with theta into minus theta, it is also related to baryon and lepton number conservation law through this formula here. And okay, this is R parity. Yes, so I said a word about the lightest supersymmetric particle. We don't know what it is. Many people, including Keith and others, have been working on that. What is it? And it could be a mixing between the photino, a ZINO, I mean, superpartner of photons, the Z boson, the Higgs boson, a mixing of all those fields. And in that case, what it means, in fact, that at the beginning, we alluded to the fact that ordinary matter could be related to the force carrier, and it didn't work. But now, if through this possible relation, it tells you that, well, dark matter may be related with the mediators of the interaction, which are the photons, the Z, and also the Higgs boson. And this is also which may be further enriched later. I'm not sure I'm going to have time to talk about that, but at some point also, we may discuss the further extension of the gauge group to an extra U1 factor in the gauge group with a new gauge boson, which I call the U boson, but which is often referred to as a dark photon. And this guy may be at the same time very light and very weakly coupled, and it leads to a very interesting new phenomenology. Now, some more thing about the fact that the Higgs boson is not at the mass of the Z boson, it has 125 GeV. And in fact, within the framework of the so-called MSSM in the minimal version of the supersymmetric standard model, in some sort of a problem, because before supersymmetry breaking in the MSSM, you have no electroweak breaking. And if you want to generate the electroweak breaking, you need the supersymmetry breaking there, and you need to use radiative correction, and the mass of the Higgs boson of the three approximations satisfies this inequality, and you want to bring it above the mass of the Z and up to 125 GeV. And you need to have large radiative correction, and to have sufficiently large radiative correction, you need to have a relatively large stop mass. Sitting there is a stop mass. So this is, it can be done, but it is also potentially problematic. So in some sense, if you extend the linear version of the supersymmetric standard model to include an extra singlet with the trilinear superpotential interaction, in that respect, the situation is a little bit better, because before supersymmetric breaking, when you have electroweak breaking, you start at the point in which the mass of the Higgs boson is equal to the mass of the Z, namely 91 GeV. And after SUSY breaking, it is much easier to get from there to the physical mass observed of the Higgs boson. So this may be an argument, there are others, to prefer extended version of the supersymmetric standard model as compared to the minimal reduction, in which having a sufficiently large Higgs boson mass is a little bit problem. And so this is some more of the same thing, what I call gauge-Higgs unification, but it is one step further in gauge-Higgs unification. In fact, in this framework, you discover that you can use a massive gauge superfield, and the massive gauge superfield is able to describe also Higgs boson. And this is rather strange. I don't have time to parent, but it is a little bit strange because you use the same superfield, which is basically, for example, for the W, it is a number of the triplet of the gauge group, and the Higgs field is a number of the doublet of the gauge group, and both appear as components of the same massive gauge superfield, although they don't have the same properties of transformation under the electroweak symmetry gauge group, which is something which is in principle forbidden, but here you can do it because the electroweak symmetry is broken, which allows you to relate the triplet to a doublet through a supersymmetry transformation, which is something which normally you are not allowed to do. So the result is, well, that maybe, in fact, the Higgs boson, which has been observed at CERN, maybe it's a Z boson without spin related to the Z boson under two supersymmetry transformation. And if I want to make propaganda, maybe, superpartners have not been discovered, but maybe the first association between known particles using the generator of supersymmetry is this one, the fact that maybe the Higgs boson is a Z without spin. From there, I have to look at the watch, you can go beyond that, you can have more symmetry. So more symmetry means nicer theory, but means also that it is more difficult to make them realistic. And so this shows you more or less that the first step, you go to n equal 2 extended supersymmetry. You take two multiplate of n equal 1, you make a box around them. It's more than making a box of crops. And with two multiplates of n equal 1, you can make a bigger multiplate of an extended algebra with two supersymmetry generators. And this is what is called the hypermultiplate for historical reason, because in this paper, I call hypersymmetry, in fact, the extended version of the supersymmetry algebra. And you can go, in fact, one step further, because if you take n equal 2 supersymmetric field with massless gauge multiplate in their joint representation, with a massless hypermultiplate in their joint representation, you put them together, you get 4 Majorana spinors, you get 2 in the gauge multiplate, 2 in the hypermultiplate, you get 4 Majorana spinors, and then when you do the thing carefully, you discover that the algebra is enriched. It is n equal 4 Yang-Mills theory, which describes a Yang-Mills gauge boson for Majorana or chiral gauginos, if you prefer, and free complex triplet, or if you prefer, 6 scalar triplet. And in this game, you can understand that you have the SU4 symmetry group acting here on this quartet, and here you have six spin zero particles, which appear in some sense as spin zero gauge boson. You have 6 of them, and they transform as a sextet of this SU4 symmetry gauge group. There is also a small problem with that, is that when you get to the supersymmetric n equal 4 Yang-Mills theory, as some of you may know, you have flat direction. The potential is flat. You can translate the field in any of the direction you like. And if you do that, of course, you break the Yang-Mills gauge symmetry, you generate mass. And if you generate mass without breaking supersymmetry, you construct new massive multiplet of supersymmetry. And what is interesting is you fabricate a new multiplet of supersymmetry in which you have a massive no, but the other, I think it doesn't work. Ouais. Ok, c'est pas grave. You have a massive gauge multiplet of supersymmetry with one gauge boson complex. You have so it is 10 degrees of freedom, 4 Dirac charging laws, so it is 16 degrees of freedom, and 5 charge Higgs laws. So altogether, you have 32 degrees of freedom. Okay, but the problem here is that you have in an algebra with 4 supersymmetric generators, and you have a multiplet which has maximum spin 1. And the massive representation of this algebra were discussed very long time ago by Salam Fabdi, and such a multiplet is not supposed to exist in this L-equal 4 supersymmetric theory. It is forbidden, but we have it. So what is going on? There is something to understand. And the thing to understand is that the n=4 supersymmetric theory, you think this is the algebra. But in fact, it is not quite exact because the algebra is extended. When you compute the anticommutator of two supersymmetry generators, not only you find the generator of translation, which is normal, but you get additional objects. Those additional objects are commonly known as being central charges. Central charge is an operator which commutes with everybody because it is in the center of the algebra. But those guys here, which people call central charges, they don't commute. They are not in the center of the algebra. So it's wrong to call them central charge. But still, what is going on? I mean, these generators, in fact, are the generator of field-dependent gauge transformation. And when you translate the scalar field, those generators acquire vacuum expectation value, and you get a spontaneous modification of the algebra. You get a new algebra, and this new algebra has really central charge, and those new central charge are in fact some of the original Yang-Mills generator. Yang-Mills generator is not in the center because they don't commute by definition, but a number of them are broken, and those who remain commute and therefore are allowed to be in the center of the algebra. So, okay, so this has to be understood. And this has, you say, well, okay, it's formal, it's algebra, we don't care. But this has consequences, because this has consequences on the multiplet of supersymmetry, which can exist or not. And when you make electroweak theory and grand unification theory, you need to know what are the multiplets of supersymmetry in which you are going to put the particles. So here, probably it's too small, you cannot read, but this transparency, this thing, which is old, tells you that if you want to play the game of extended supersymmetry, you have to consider different types of multiplets. You have massless multiplet, for example, the photon. You have two photinos, and you have two spin zero photons. Same thing for the gluon. The W is associated with 4 Dirac Winos, not only 2, but 4 Dirac Winos and 5 charge Higgs boson. And that's a massive multiplet because you have 4 Dirac Winos. It doesn't require a central charge. But for example, if you go to SU5, in SU5 you have X and Y new gauge boson, and they belong to different sorts of multiplet of supersymmetry. They require central charge, and because they require central charge, the multiplet of the Higgs X includes 2 Dirac Xino, and the multiplet of the Y includes 4 of them. It's relatively technical. I don't have time to go into details. And at the end, okay, this you cannot read anyway, but what is shown is the content of the massless or massive multiplet of extended supersymmetry within the framework of SU5. And this you do, I told you before that you work with two doublets, two electroweak doublets, but now to do that, you need to work with 4 electroweak doublets, and to do that within SU5, you do that with 4 quintuplets of SU5. And this I showed because at the end, there is some line which tells you that if you include an extra U1 factor in the gauge group, you include an additional multiplet of n equal 2, which includes a new gauge boson, possibly light, associated with 4 major Lagrange and 5 so-called dark Higgs boson in modern language. So this means that you have a possibility to have an extra U1 gauge boson, which is a type of thing that people now call a dark photon or generalized dark photon, associated with supersymmetric partner and associated with dark Higgs boson. Of course, this is not completely realistic because you are in a n equal 2 theory. In n equal 2 theory are not really realistic because they are a vector light. You don't know what to do with chirality. You need to introduce mirror quarks and lepton and so on. So there are a number of questions which remain to be solved in some sense if you want to do n equal 2 supersymmetric theory. But the natural thing at this place, just a few minutes more, you have to go to extra dimensions because in extended supersymmetric theory, the photon is associated with 2 spin-0 photons. And those 2 spin-0 photons become the additional degrees of freedom of the photon field within 6-dimensional spacetime. And the spin-0 gluons also are the additional degrees of freedom of the gluon field in 6 dimensions. And then if you go to n equal 4, then you express the thing in 10 dimensions. But again, it's even more difficult to make it realistic than for n equal 2. Okay, one more word also. What is nice if you discuss grand unification breaking within 6 dimensions is that usually we are used to talk about electroweak symmetry and electroweak symmetry breaking. But in fact, at 6 dimensions, you discover that you have within SU5, a SU4 electrostrong symmetry group, which unifies the photon with the gluon, and you don't care about the W. You unify directly electromagnetism with strong interaction, together, of course, with the interaction mediated by the Higgs boson of grand unification within a 15 representation, a joint representation of the SU4 electrostrong symmetry group. The doublet triplet splitting problem is solved. I don't have the time to discuss that. It's a technical question. And one question, of course, is what do you do to break supersymmetry and to break grand unification when you have extra dimension? And one way to do this is to use the extra dimension to generate the breaking for both supersymmetry and extra dimension. And you can do that using the extra compact dimension of the 6-dimensional space-time. And then the large masses of superpartners, for example, are supposed to correspond to the large value of the superpartners along the compact dimension. And what you can do too is you can use discrete boundary condition to just find that the supersymmetry breaking scale and the grand unification breaking scale, both of them may be fixed by the compactification scale, and you can take for one of them the 5th dimension and for the other the 6th dimension. Or you can do more forcey things, but this is quite interesting. However, there are plenty of other questions to solve, which I don't have time to discuss. What do you do with quarks and lepton and so on? And don't have time to discuss that. I wanted to talk about U boson and so on, axion, invisible axion, but I don't have the time, I guess. I just show transparency single, very short, and then I go to the conclusion. As I said, to discuss that, you go to an extra U1 gauge group, which you gauge. So you have to know, what do you gauge? And what do you gauge? You take everything which is there, and you can gauge a linear combination of this. And the generator of this extra U1 gauge group, it can be the weak hypercharge, as many people are doing, but it can be a weak hypercharge combined with baryon number, lepton number, or B minus L, or an axial symmetry generator, or a generator even with dark matter, everybody. So you get a new gauge boson, which is a generalized dark photon. It can mix with a Z boson. After the mixing, you look at what you get. You get, in general, both a vector current and an axial current. The vector coupling involved a combination of conserved quantities like Q, B, L, or B minus L. Axial coupling, they are responsible for an axion-like behavior of the new gauge boson. And as we know, axion-like behavior, nobody has seen an axion up to now. So you better make it as an invisible axion-like behavior. So that's it. So now, as I said, I have to go to the conclusion. So there are three transparencies, but it will be very short because basically I said everything already. So within supersymmetry, you expect, quote unquote, the existence of a whole world of new particle. You extend space-time to new anti-commuting coordinates. So it is some sort of a conceptual revolution. You have a new geometric symmetry of space-time, which is R parity. You have many reasons to believe in supersymmetry. I told them already, so I don't comment more. And at the end, but this I said already before, one of the nice things is that you can have relation between massive gauge boson and Higgs boson, and you can even think that the Higgs boson, which we know about, may be the spin zero partner of the Z under two supersymmetry transformation. And if we are optimistic, maybe it's a first sign for supersymmetry. So of course, to know that, we have to do more experiments. So the future will tell about that. So my really last transparency is to thank everybody, all the people who have made this possible, all the inventors of the supersymmetry algebra, all the people who have worked of supersymmetry, grand unification, everything, all the experimentalists who have done much work in order to try to find those objects and which didn't succeed up to now, but we are hoping that they may be successful sometime. Thank you for listening, and thank you for attributing me this award. I'm very honored and flattered.